Hey there, YouTubers. This is going to be a Python talk a little bit, but it's also about object-oriented programming in general. If you have eagerness to learn JavaScript, or you're going from JavaScript to Python, or you're interested in Smalltalk or Pharo. In case of Pharo, I'm no expert, but I think of Smalltalk as the sort of progenitor of all object-oriented languages. So I'm starting with a Python 3 kernel in a Jupyter Notebook. You've heard me talk about Jupyter Notebooks a lot. They're not a replacement for an interactive development environment. They have their own charms, but they are a useful place to just do some basic intro scratchpad kind of work. And the first thing I want to talk about, of course, is what's most important in Python, I'd say, is the data structure called the dictionary. And I'm just going to make this big here, and maybe I won't have to edit it later. So you can create a dictionary with the dict type as your callable and just say something like, I want my key named A to have the value 1 and my key named B to have the value 2, and we'll do something very predictable here because I'm trying to focus not so much on the content of the dictionary as in how easy that was to create. And now let's take a look at the results. Nothing. There it is. That's my result. A is 1, B, when I say A is 1, what I really mean is A is a key to the value 1. So it's like a cubbyhole labeled A, and in that cubbyhole is 1. One way to think of it. There are many metaphors you could dredge up at this point. Okay, now I want to create a dictionary in another way entirely. I'm going to create a dog class, which you might expect a polyhedron class as well. I might get to that. So a dog class with no content, like that keyword pass just means do nothing. So here's a dog that does nothing whatsoever, but even so, that's enough for me to create a dog. We'll just call him lowercase dog, give birth to a dog that simply. And why does that work? Because just in being a dog type, you've inherited the ability to give birth to your instances, your progenitors, your actual dog objects. So the dog type, which we've created here with class dog, is like the blueprint, although that analogy has some flaws in it. Everyone who tells you that the class is like a blueprint, there's some caveats to that. It's a blueprint that you can run electricity through and get the blueprint itself to do some work. So it's not like just a passive piece of paper like a blueprint where then you go off and build the apartment building. Somehow the blueprint remains an active part of the circuitry, if that makes any sense. But let's now, with this dog object, give it a color. Now dogs are often multicolor, but we'll go with white, and we'll give it a name. We'll go with Quinn, and we can give it a breed if we want to, if we're into knowing what the breed is. I'm going to say, I don't know, and I can actually explicitly say none, which is kind of a non-applicable, or don't know. There's lots of things I could put here. None is a little bit problematic. Some languages don't like having that, but Python has a none, a true, and a false, all capitalized. Now, why have I done this, and what have I done? I've assigned what we call attributes. A .color, .name, and .breed. We call this dot notation. The dot is an accessor. It accesses. It goes in and reaches into. It's a very important concept because it creates the concept of container. If you're into Mereology, M-E-R-E-O, logy, that's the logic that focuses on containership as like a primary paradigm. And object-oriented is a Mereological construct because we think in terms of containers. This dog has content now. It has 3 attributes, but it also has created a dictionary. Where does it store those 3 attributes with those values? In a dictionary. And there it is, color white, name Quinn, breed none. Now, I'm going to wrap this up soon. This is not a long video, but I'm going to go back and redefine the dog to have just a slightly more complex architecture. I'm going to include 2 methods And the double underline methods have to do with the language itself. They're like scaffolding. In other words, you're given these double underline words. You don't have to make them up. They're part of the language. I call them ribs in some cases, as in ribs, but they're really known as special names and such. And it's a way to get things into that dictionary at initialization time that I'm showing you now. In other words, when I give birth to my new dog object, I want to be able to pass in the color and the name at the same time. And I also want to create a bark method where the dog will bark however many times. And at this point, I'm going to return rather than print that many barks. I could go straight to printing here and send it to console, but I would rather return the value bark n times. So this here, let's see, I can turn off having this, how can I change to see? I can toggle the header. So there's the dog, bigger, bigger, bigger. So here's my new dog type. I've made it more complicated than just pass. And what I want to show you when I define this dog now is when I give birth to a dog, now I can pass the name and the color right away as I give birth. Very cool. But the end result is going to be the same thing. We're going to put a bunch of key value pairs in dogged under dict. That's how we pronounce it. Dogged under dict is now kind of that same dictionary. I skipped worrying about the breed, and now if I do dog.bark, see, I'm reaching into the dog with the period, or the dot as we call it, and I'm saying I want you to bark 10 times. And that's going to come in as n because Python already knows the self from just using this word dog. The dog has the self. You could say the soul of the dog is in this dog. And that automatically populates the keyword self because we have to tell one dog apart from the other. Different dogs, different names, different contents, different attributes. So there's the dog barking 10 times. Now here's what's interesting. First of all, I could have called that at the class level. I could have said a generic dog, we don't know which dog, in which case, when I say bark, I'd better pass the dog in question because we don't know anymore. The self is gone when I just say generic dog and not specific dog. So then I'm obligated to say, okay, which dog I'm talking about, and I can still bark 5 times and so forth. The other thing to note is at the class level, we also have a dictionary. And that's where we store the actual functions for barking, giving birth, the dict of the dog itself. A lot of this stuff gets stored at the dog level, at the class level. So there's a dog.dict under a lowercase dog that I've created for the instance attributes, which is not anything but what is special to that dog. And then there's the generic dog or the class or type dog and its dictionary. And that's kind of like in JavaScript and other languages that use the dictionary as kind of the jumping off point for building the whole idea of a class or type. You'll find this is embedded in JavaScript too. With the self or soul or whatever you want to call it as the kind of the glue that holds the data together with the methods. So the ability for objects of a certain type to work with their own data, like their own color, attributes, their state. Like when you play an action game and your hero gets in a fight and whatever happens, that changes their state and you need to record that somehow. Now in a language like Smalltalk, when you save that game, the whole image gets saved. It's kind of interesting how that works, and I'm wondering if Pharaoh works that way. As opposed to, there are ways to save state in Python too. You can store the current state of the game in various data structures, and when you restore, it can put you back where you left off. but it's not as built in, you could say, as in the Smalltalk idea of an image. But we won't talk about that in any depth. I just want to give you a little talk on Python in the context of a Jupyter Notebook. And what we could do now, since this is a Jupyter Notebook, is create Markdown cells. We could go back as like a teacher now and change this cell from being a code cell to a Markdown cell. So the cell type is now Markdown, and now I can type something like Intro to Object-Oriented Programming and say welcome to OSCON 2019 or 2019 or whatever we want to call it. And we can start adding pictures and so on. Speaking of pictures, I have just uploaded a few pictures from the latest OSCON. I had a guest in the guest room, and that's where I do my picture uploading, so I didn't bother that person right away. But here we are in the early hours of OSCON. I just seen Triumph of the Will, which is I haven't even written my movie review of that yet because I have so much to say and so much to catch up on. But it was kind of a relief to come to OSCON, which is very friendly. Of course, nothing was really much going on yet at this time of day. This is a Sunday evening, and nothing is really going on, right? I've got my C60 there. They're still doing setup. They took me behind the scenes on another occasion. And there's the brand new Hyatt Hotel, and there's a bunch of construction going on around the actual grounds of the convention center. The Hyatt looks to be like almost finished, but not quite. So there'll be a lot of hotel rooms right across the street. And there we are in the speaker's lounge, mission accomplished with that particular item. And here we are in the beginning of the Rust tutorial, which was inspiring and got me interested in teaching again. And here we go, out for lunch. Now, I missed all this today because I'm too caught up in my local business, but I'll be back. We'll see you again shortly, folks. Talk to you soon.